All right, welcome back. We've got a new topic to talk about, and that is the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is a pretty simple thing. What you do in order to get a really cool composition is you imagine your frame divided into thirds along both axes. So I'm going to pretend that there are imaginary lines dividing it into thirds there, and also horizontally another couple of lines that will divide it into thirds. Now, so if this is your frame and these are your magical rule of third lines, then what do you do with those? Well, first of all, you can take basic ideas of sort of landscape photography and say, oh, well, put your horizon on one of these two lines. So if we say, oh, okay, well, we're going to take our picture and we're going to put the horizon line down here so that it coincides with that line. Now, that's probably better than, putting it in the middle of the frame and only having this much space left over to work with. So we'll put our horizon line there on that bottom rule of third lines. And then what are we going to do about our person? Well, we have a lot of different options. We could put our person right in the middle, but that's kind of boring. Again, this gives us that overly balanced frame that just doesn't look that appealing. And we ask ourselves, why is there space over here? Why is there space over here? It actually causes your eye to do a lot of work that it doesn't really want to do, so it doesn't feel as pleasing. Because this person is breaking up negative space on both sides, and so you kind of have to look all the way around this image in order to sort of take the whole thing in. So it's kind of disconcerting, and it doesn't feel very good. And also, if you'll notice, we didn't put it on the lines. So if we put our person on the line here, suddenly this is a by default sort of better composition because we're using our rule of third. And we put a vertical something or other on this vertical line, and we've got a horizontal something on this horizontal line, and that gives us a nice bit of room for dramatic tension, something to happen. There's this negative space over here, and that would be nice if this person were kind of looking in this direction. Or there could be something else going on over here that you might want to balance it out with. I mean, maybe some puffy clouds, some happy little trees, whatever it is that delights you. But the focus of your picture is now here on this line. Now, it could be even better because in addition to using the lines themselves, the intersections, these points here, are what we would call power corners or power spots or magic intersection of goodness, whatever you want to call it. Those are even more powerful than the lines themselves. So if we then put our person's face right there, and they're standing sort of in the foreground, and I guess, is that a mustache or is that part of his head? I don't know. So he's standing there and he's got his head right there on the power spot on the intersection. And that's even better. There's a lot of psychological mathematics and what do you call it, like neuroscience that goes into showing that if you put these things on these lines, then they're going to be more powerful, sort of better compositions. So let's get rid of those and look at another example. I'm going to get my red frame. Actually, this time let's start off with the idea of a person. And we'll draw their head, and they're happy. They have a button nose, how cute. And they're just hanging out, and we're gonna take a picture of them with their freakishly large bony hands. I don't know, man. I'm in an art school. I'm not sure why they let me in the door when I can't draw very well. But okay, so here's the person, and we have the opportunity to take a photograph of this person. How do we want to frame them up? Sort of the default way that anybody who's not familiar with the tenets of photography and cinematography would probably just put them right in the middle there and maybe give them some weird headroom, and then you were going, oh, okay, what's going on all the way around here? That's kind of a strange composition, not making the most out of it. But if we remember our rule of thirds, we can place our frame such that we put it there, and we remember that there's these imaginary lines, and we're going to put their eyes right at that intersection. And ahoy, that's the new word I'm using. Everybody start picking that up. That's my new slang. It's like, yo, ahoy, what's up? It's pirate slang. That gives you an interesting composition. Now again, this person is sort of looking to the right, and we have that capability to make some room for a balanced frame because they have look space, and it becomes suddenly much more interesting. Now, this doesn't always just happen with people. You can frame other things this way as well. But it's easiest to sort of measure this thinking about people and placing those lines in the frame. When in doubt, the idea for framing something like an interview or a shot is to put the object of most interest, which in a close-up shot of a person is going to be their eyes and their mouth. So ideally, you'd be able to put, a big face here, eyes there, mouth there, and you'll be using your awesome powers for good, and you'll be much better than my drawings. Okay, so now let's look at this with an actual photograph to work with. And let's not try to print the document while I'm in the middle of a webcast, shall we? Okay, so here's a real photograph that somebody took, and it's a picture of obviously the Statue of Liberty. Now on the left-hand side here, we've got one of the options for shooting this photograph, and it's all right. I could imagine that. Oh, let's scribble on it. We've got her right in the center, and this is a squarish picture, and the primary area of interest is going to be right here on her face. So it's not taking advantage of any of the rule of thirds or compositional elements, and you've got all of this space on either side of her that is being broken up, and you're wondering why, and your eye has to go, hey, there's a thing here, and no, there's nothing over here, no, there's nothing over there, I guess I'll look over here. Compare that to this shot where the composition has followed the rule of thirds, and we've not only placed the statue itself on this right-hand vertical, we've also put this interesting focal area of her face and crown right there at that power point. And suddenly it becomes much more interesting. The white space isn't nearly as equally broken up. We've got this big section here, so our eye can go, okay, nothing there. That's not what I'm supposed to be looking at. And there's a tiny spot here, but this weight right here where it is placed obviously pulls your eye right to it and says, oh yeah, cool, that's what I wanted to look at, and there's something interesting to look at there. So you're not fighting with the viewer's eye, you're actually showing them something cool where their eye kind of wants to go already. And that's what these rule of thirds lines are, is sort of a representation of what we have sort of socially and evolutionarily become accustomed to in terms of looking for details and objects inside of a frame. Now, of course, rules are meant to be broken, and there are very good reasons to not use this, but one reason that you should never do it is because you didn't think about it. If you have a reason to go off on one of these lines, that's great, but in lieu of having some greater compositional vision, then stick to your rule of thirds and you'll make things awesome. And one thing I like to point out about this picture is thinking about what they say. When you're using an image, remember going back to our cinematic grammar and language, every frame, every single shot is actually saying something. It's a word or a short statement. So if you look at this picture, I see the Statue of Liberty, and it's right in the middle of a photo, and I'm like, okay, so that says the Statue of Liberty exists, I guess. There's no sort of editorializing going on here. This is not giving me any kind of sense of context or anything. It's just right in the middle, just like an illustration would be in a dictionary or something like that. I come over here and I see this, and I'm like, oh, wait, cool. Somebody went to art school, and they composed this shot and intentionally left a whole bunch of blank space over here. Now, your sort of technical illustration people would be like, well, that's a bunch of wasted space. Why would you do that? But looking at it, you realize that this is actually saying something else. By changing your shot, you're picking basically a different word or phrase that it's standing for. So whereas this picture basically says the Statue of Liberty exists, this picture says the Statue of Liberty exists and it is awesome. it's putting it on this line of power, saying that it's more important than the space around it. It's not a neutral picture. It's compositionally interesting and giving you something to focus on where you want to see those details. So saying something different, a neutral viewpoint of, oh, this is a boring balanced picture, and it says that Statue of Liberty is there in the shot. This one says the Statue of Liberty is something awesome, and that's told by the way that it outbalances all this negative space over here and looks majestic and has room to sort of have that view space, kind of brings it to life, like, oh, well, she's facing in this direction and she's got room to look over here, so maybe I start to think of her as more than an inanimate statue and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of power in using something like the rule of thirds for your compositional elements. And again, by default, you should be following these rules until you come up with a better option.